If you grew up short of money in Britain before the 1970s or so, you probably knew the exact sound your gas or electric meter made right before it cut you off. It was a sort of click, maybe a little whir, and then darkness if it was the electric, or no heat if it was the gas. The meters took coins, usually shillings, sometimes tanners or threepenny bits. You fed them in through a slot and they dropped into a locked box inside. Most families kept a little pile of shillings somewhere near the meter, usually in a cupboard under the stairs. When the power cut out, you had to scramble around in the dark feeling for a coin. Once a month or so, the meter man arrived with his special key, opened the box, and counted out your coins on the kitchen table in neat stacks. If you had overpaid, you got a rebate, which was a godsend for families scraping by. If the meter was absolutely stuffed full, you worried it would jam and refuse to take any more coins. In most homes before central heating became common, only one room ever saw proper warmth during winter. This was typically the living room or kitchen, whichever had the main fireplace. The rest of the house stayed absolutely freezing. Families essentially lived their entire day in that single heated space. You'd eat there, work there, do your homework there, spend your evenings there. The moment you left that room to head upstairs to bed, you stepped into an Arctic zone. Bedrooms were particularly brutal. Frost patterns would form on the inside of windows, and water in wash basins froze solid overnight. Even wealthy families followed this pattern, perhaps heating a second room if they were really posh. In 1942, a British survey of working-class households found that nearly three-quarters heated just one room during winter. It wasn't poverty causing this, it was simply how heating worked. Coal or wood fires couldn't efficiently warm multiple rooms, so you concentrated the heat where you spent most of your time and accepted the cold everywhere else. Cold bedrooms were just normal in winter for most people. You woke up and could see your breath hanging in the air above the bed, especially if your room faced north or had an outside wall. The heating either didn't reach upstairs properly or you switched it off overnight to save money. So bedrooms dropped to whatever the outside temperature was doing, sometimes down to 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. You piled on extra blankets, sometimes 3 or 4 layers, and you slept under the weight of them. Getting out of bed in the morning was the worst bit. You had maybe 30 seconds of tolerance before the cold really hit. So you grabbed your clothes and dressed as fast as possible, often still half under the covers. If you were unlucky, your school uniform was freezing to the touch because it had been hanging up all night. Socks went on first. Always. The floor was like ice on bare feet. Once you were dressed, you could deal with it, but that transition from warm bed to cold room was brutal every single morning. Buying a TV in the 1950s was an absolute fortune. Something like £61 when a decent tradesman might earn £9 a week. So most families rented instead. You'd go down to Radio Rentals or Granada or one of the other rental shops on the high street and sign up for weekly payments. Maybe 8 shillings and 6pence, sometimes more depending on the set. The telly arrived in a hulking wooden cabinet and sat there like a piece of furniture you didn't quite own. If it broke down, which happened constantly with all those valves and cathode ray tubes, you rang the rental company and a man came round in a van to fix it or swap it out for another one. That was the beauty of renting. You never paid for repairs. Some sets even had coin meters on the back, slots for your shillings, and when the meter man came to empty it monthly, you got a portion back. It was pure making do, paying as you went, never quite owning anything outright, but getting by all the same. Second-hand school uniform is something most parents end up considering. Kids grow fast and uniforms cost more than they should, especially when the school insists on branded jumpers from specific suppliers. A typical family spends around £300 per year on school clothes per child. You can find pre-loved uniform through school swap shops, local Facebook groups, or jumble sales. The main things to check are fit and condition. A missing button can be sorted easily enough, but stains on white shirts or worn collars are best avoided. Some schools are quite strict about everything looking pristine, which makes buying used a bit trickier. The trousers usually end up baggy or short. The sleeves never quite the right length, the collar loose. Nothing fits perfectly when it's been worn by someone else first. You wash everything before use, iron out the creases, sew on name tags if needed. It's practical clothing meant to last until the next growth spurt hits. Hand-me-downs save money and keep wearable stuff from landfill. Shoes were expensive, so parents bought them a size or two too big. You'd stuff cardboard or newspaper in the toes, wear extra socks, and shuffle around like you were wearing clown shoes. The idea was that you'd grow into them eventually, which you did, but by then they'd be worn out anyway. On the flip side, when your shoes got too small, you kept wearing them until your toes poked through or the soles flapped loose. Some kids walked around with rubber bands wrapped around their shoes to hold the soles on temporarily. You'd hear that distinctive flip-flop sound on the playground when someone's shoe was coming apart. Cardboard inserts became standard equipment when holes appeared in the soles, though they turned to mush in the rain. Parents would press their thumbs against the toe box asking if there was enough room, and every kid knew to say yes regardless. Getting new shoes before the scheduled time was a family crisis, so you limped along in shoes that either swallowed your feet or pinched them mercilessly, because that's just how it was when money was tight. This one is straightforward. You take whatever juice you've got, concentrate, carton, bottle, and add more water than you're supposed to. It might be an extra half can when mixing frozen concentrate, or a glass meant to be pure juice filled half with water instead. The goal is simple: make it last longer. Families with several kids learn this quickly. 3 children sharing one carton can have small glasses that taste proper or bigger glasses stretched 50-50 with water. Most go for bigger glasses. The kids get used to it. Some parents dilute gradually, starting at 70-30 and working weaker as the week goes on. You can top up a bottle when it's halfway empty, doubling what's left. The taste changes, obviously. Water juice is thinner, sweeter drinks lose their punch, fizzy ones go flat faster. But when you're counting pennies per glass, weak juice beats no juice. It's thrift at its smallest scale, an extra week out of every 4 cans. Fewer shop trips, a couple quid saved. If you wanted to save money at the supermarket, you went straight to the bottom shelf where the budget ranges lived. These were the value labels, the no-frills basics, the products that announced to everyone in the queue exactly how carefully you were counting your pennies. Tesco had their blue and white striped value range. Sainsbury's had orange basics, and Asda had smart price in plain packaging that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never heard of design. The names were brutally honest too, just beans or bread or spaghetti hoops with no attempt at making them sound appealing. Kids picked up the brand hierarchy fast, learning which tins were acceptable to be seen with at school and which weren't. A family might save a quid 58 on toilet paper or 72 pence on tinned tomatoes by switching down, and for households genuinely stretch those savings added up fast. The packaging used bright primary colours, yellow, orange, that screamed simplicity and urgency, the same shades used for end-of-day discount stickers. There was real shame attached to these products for many shoppers, even when the quality was often perfectly fine. Free school meals were one of those things that marked you out whether you liked it or not. In lots of schools, there were systems that made it obvious who got them and who didn't. Sometimes it was vouchers you had to hand over at the till, while everyone else paid with coins. In some places, the payment card would flash up FSM on the display when you swiped it, and other kids in the queue would notice. There were schools where free meal students had to line up separately or sit at different tables from children who brought packed lunches, which meant you couldn't sit with your friends. School trips made it even more visible because free school meal kids got handed a brown paper bag lunch while everyone else had their own stuff from home. Some children refused to take their free meal on trip days because of this. It wasn't about political debates, it was just another way that money differences showed up in everyday school life. Packed lunches built around sandwiches were the backbone of stretching a tight food budget, and bread did most of the heavy lifting. The cheapest fillings were peanut butter, jam, cheese spreads from jars, and paste. You could get a massive jar of peanut butter for a couple of quid, and it would last you 2 weeks of daily sandwiches. Same with jam or those little pots of sandwich spread that cost about 50 pence. Cheese wasn't as cheap unless you bought economy blocks and grated it yourself. The real secret was that 2 thick slices of bread gave you bulk and filled you up regardless of the thin layer smeared between them. If you were lucky, you might get some leftover meat from Sunday dinner to slice up for Monday's sandwiches. Otherwise, it was back to peanut butter or a simple cheese sandwich. Eating the same sandwich 5 days running was just how it worked when money was tight. You weren't aiming for variety, You were aiming to not spend £3 on a meal deal every lunchtime. If you had no cash and no bank account, catalogue shopping and weekly payment plans became the only way to furnish a home or clothe your family. Stores made it sound simple: £1 down, £1 a week, and you could walk out with a new sofa or winter coat. But what they didn't shout about was the final price. A settee that cost £70 in cash might end up costing you £150 by the time you finished paying weekly. Everything from shoes to bedsheets could be bought this way, and for families living paycheck to paycheck, spreading the cost felt like the only option. The trouble was, you ended up paying far more in the long run. Some families juggled multiple payment books, one for furniture, another for clothes, maybe a third for the wireless. Miss a payment, and you risked having the lot repossessed, losing everything you'd already paid in. The man from the shop might turn up at your door without warning, demanding the goods back. It was a system designed to keep people trapped, paying and paying, never quite getting ahead. Being poor was expensive. Bus fare maths was simple arithmetic that mattered enormously. You needed to know the exact fare before you approached the stop, because drivers rarely appreciated fumbling through pockets on board. In most places during the 70s and 80s, a single adult fare might be 25p or 30p depending on distance. You'd count out your coins beforehand, checking you had the right combination. It got complicated if you had 32p and the fare was 30, but you also needed milk that cost 45p. This is where walking entered the calculation. Could you walk the 2 miles and save that 30p for something essential? Many people did exactly this mental arithmetic multiple times per week. If you were carrying shopping or it was raining hard, the bus became necessary rather than optional. But on a dry day with time available, walking kept those coins in reserve. The decision revealed how tight things were because transport wasn't automatically affordable. It was something you evaluated against other needs each time. When something breaks in your home, the first instinct these days is to bin it and order a replacement. But that sweater with a torn seam or toaster that won't quite heat properly often just needs 15 minutes of attention rather than a trip to the tip. The habit of mending extends the life of almost everything you own. From clothing to appliances to furniture, start with your wardrobe because sewing is easier than you think. A loose button takes 3 minutes to secure properly, and a ripped hem needs only basic stitches to look decent again. Small appliances like vacuum cleaners usually break for simple reasons like clogged filters or worn belts, both fixable for under £10. Coffee makers stop working because of mineral buildup, not catastrophic failure, so a vinegar rinse often brings them back to life. Even electronics like phones respond to battery replacements rather than needing complete replacement. The satisfying bit is that repair skills stack up over time, so each fix makes the next one less intimidating. You save money whilst keeping perfectly functional items out of landfills. Most household possessions are designed to be serviced, even if manufacturers would prefer you bought new models instead. When the money ran out before payday, or when the Giro hadn't arrived yet, meals got stripped back to basics. Toast became a proper meal option, not just breakfast. You'd have it for tea with maybe a scraping of margarine if you were lucky, salt and pepper if you had them in the cupboard. Some people made what was called a toast sandwich, which was literally a slice of cold toast between 2 slices of bread. This one dates back to Victorian times and cost about 7p in 2010. The idea was that the different textures made it more interesting to eat, the crispy bit in the middle against the soft outer layers. If you had tea bags left, you'd make a cup to go with it. Otherwise, it was tap water. Maybe you had a banana to slice on top if there was fruit left in the house. This wasn't some temporary hardship people talked about dramatically. It was just how things were for a few days each month. You got used to it, planned around it, and didn't make a fuss because what else were you going to do? The bread filled you up enough to sleep. Child benefit landed every 4 weeks, usually on a Monday or Tuesday. And if you grew up in a household where that money mattered, you knew exactly when it arrived. You didn't need anyone to explain it. The shift was just there, visible in small ways throughout the week. The fridge suddenly had juice, maybe some proper cheese instead of the economy block. Your mum might suggest getting chips on the way home instead of making you wait until you got in. The tension that had been there for the past few days, that tightness around money conversations, lifted. The week before benefit day was different. Meals got simpler. You heard "we'll see" more often when you asked for things. If you needed new shoes, the answer was probably "wait until next week." In some houses, this rhythm dictated everything from whether the heating went on to whether anyone suggested going swimming. Children picked up on these patterns quickly, learning to time their requests, understanding without being told that some weeks were lean weeks and others weren't. If you ran short before payday, the corner shop might let you have things on tick. Tick meant credit, or as some called it, the slate. The shopkeeper would keep a book under the counter with people's names in it. You'd come in on a Tuesday, say you needed bread and milk and a tin of beans, and the shopkeeper would write down what you took and how much it cost. Come Friday, when your wages arrived, or Monday when the pension came through, you'd settle up. Most people did pay because if you didn't, you'd lose the privilege, and that could mean going hungry before the week was out. It was entirely based on trust and knowing your customers. The shopkeeper knew who lived where, knew their circumstances, knew if they were good for it. Some shops would cut people off after they'd run up too much. Others would quietly let a bill slide if they knew someone was genuinely desperate. It wasn't charity exactly, more like neighborly insurance. You helped people through the rough patches because you might need the same one day.